Hello and welcome to this session. This is Professor Farhat. In this session, we would look at a SOC 1 Type 2. In the prior session, we looked at SOC 1 Type 1. Well, I hope you viewed the prior session because the assumption here is you did view it, because when I cover SOC 1 Type 2, I'm going to go over the differences between Type 1 and Type 2 rather than going over the details of every single aspect of the report. As I mentioned earlier, when I went over SOC 1 Type 1, if you can follow this report, it means you have a comprehensive overview of SOC 1 Type 1 engagement, SOC 1 Type 2 engagement, if you follow or you understand what I'm gonna cover in this recording. This recording will be shorter because all what I'm doing is highlighting the differences in the two reports. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com.
Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses, broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today.
So again, the title would include the word independent because this is an attestation engagement. However, notice what's happening here. Service auditors report on KLM service description of its system and the suitability of design, and this is new, operating effectiveness of control. Once you see the operating effectiveness of the control, you know you are dealing with the Type 2 report. Now, whether it's a SOC 1 or a SOC 2, depending on what type of controls are you looking at. This is a Type 1 because we're dealing with internal control over financial reporting. Again, the scope will be similar. The only difference is we are doing what? We are testing the operating effectiveness over a period of time. We're looking at the description, the suitability of the design, and the operating effectiveness. So the suitability of the design and operating effectiveness, and for a period of time. Otherwise, everything else is the same. It's the company's responsibility. The management of KLM is responsible for the description, for the suitability of the design, and for the operating effectiveness. Our job as auditor is to issue an opinion. Is to do what? Issue an opinion. So, service organization responsibility is responsible for everything that's provided to us, which is the description, the suitability of the design, and operating effectiveness of the control. And same concept, except in Type 1, we don't have the operating effectiveness, and in SOC 1 is for a point in time. This is for a period of time. The auditor's job is to express an opinion on the fairness, basically the same thing, but it's for a period of time. We are not only covering a point in time, and we're also covering the operating effectiveness of the design and operating effectiveness of the control to achieve the related control. And it's when we do that for a period of time. We don't look at one day and say, well, the controls are operating effectively. We need to test it for a period of time. Otherwise, everything else is the same. Here they tell us what they do: an examination of the description of the service organization and the suitability of the design and operating effectiveness control involve performing procedures to obtain evidence about the fairness and operating effectiveness of the control. It's not only the fairness of the design and the suitability of design for a period of time, and the operating effectiveness. Again, assessing the risk that the description is not fairly presented and that the control were not suitably designed or operating effectively. Again, operating effectively. Testing of the operating, this is specific to Type 2, because in Type 2 we'll do testing of operating effectiveness that management consider necessary to provide reasonable assurance. We cannot provide reasonable assurance without testing. So that's basically the main differences. Also, inherent limitation will exist in every control, whether it's a Type 1, Type 2, SOC 1, or SOC 2. But here we mention also there's inherent limitation about the operating effectiveness, of course, because we don't know whether it's going to be operating in the future as we think or not. So there's a paragraph called inherent limitation, and there's a paragraph called description of test of control. And this tells you it's a type 2. So on the CPA exam, once you see description of type of test of control, you are dealing with a type 2, because in a type 2 is when you test the control, whether you're testing internal control over financial reporting, which is SOC 1, or testing trust services criterias. That's a type 2. Test of is control in type 2. Now you're going to have a list of these, nature, timing, and we'll talk about the testing later on in a separate recording. Then we issue an opinion. The opinion here will mention that the system is operating effectively throughout a period of time. It's not only we looked at the description and the suitability of control for a point in time, it's for a period of time, and the controls operating effectively for a period of time. Notice here, period, date to date, the period of that time. And of course, we have to restrict type 2, SOC 1 type 2, and any type 2. Why? Because it's designed to be delivered to 3 parties: the company that hired the service, the service organization itself, the company that hired the auditor, the management of, in this situation, KLM, the user entities of KLM services. Could be more than one company using KLM services. So management of KLM is one group that gets this report. That's one company. Entities of KLM service organization, they could be many, but it's basically one group in a sense. It's users entity. And the auditors of those users entity, also because they need to know how the internal control over financial reporting at the service organization is working, because they need to conduct an audit of the user entity. So it's restricted. Then we have the date. Once again, if you can follow, if you can read this report and like kind of nodding, you say, yes, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense, it means you understand what a SOC 1 type 1 and what a SOC type 2 report should look like, what should they include, and you have a basic understanding of what's needed. What should you do now? You want to go to Farhat Lectures, look at additional MCQs, additional resources that's going to help you. Now, obviously, in the next session, I'm going to look at SOC 2, Type 1, and Type 2. We have 2 more reports to cover. Stay motivated, invest in yourself, study for your CPA exam. Farhat Lectures, always here to help.